Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Ari Sowers. I am with Respondus, and you are here to learn about how to use two of our applications, namely Lockdown Browser and Respondus Monitor, with your ALEKS higher education courses, math and science courses. That is the only learning system we are covering today. So if you use a different platform, I'm so sorry, but you're in the wrong place. We do have daily training webinars for our other integrations with platforms like Blackboard and Canvas and Moodle and Schoology and Brightspace. So please check those out. But if you use ALEKS for math and science, you are in the right place. So thank you for joining us. A little bit of housekeeping before I jump in. You're using a platform called GoToWebinar. You have options to call in by phone or listen over your speakers on your computer. I'll warn you, if you have any internet connectivity issues, if things are slow, so many of us are working from home, and the kids are home, and the college students are home. If you have trouble hearing me, that's the likely culprit. So go to the control panel, which is either that thing floating around your screen or it might be in the right side of your browser window, and try to call in by phone. That usually alleviates that problem. Also in that same panel, and some of you have already found it, so thank you so much, that you are asking if you can hear. Well, yes, you can hear. Great. You're waiting for us to start. You found our questions pane. So that's where you can submit questions to us. Now, there are some other Respondus staff on the line who will try to answer your questions if we can do them in writing. We are going to save some of your questions to read out loud at the end of the session. And yes, we are recording this session. So everyone who attends or everyone who registers, if you have to leave halfway, or if you have colleagues who missed it, we'll send this recording out to everybody too. All right, so enough of the housekeeping. Let's jump in. As I mentioned, we actually have two applications that work with the ALEKS platform. The first one is called Lockdown Browser, and I'm going to describe Lockdown Browser now briefly because it's such an important part of how the second application works. And the second application is called Respondus Monitor, and that's our automated proctoring solution. And that might be what most of you are here for today because of the coronavirus and schools moving things online. But bear with me as we talk about Lockdown Browser because it is such an important part of how Respondus Monitor works. I wouldn't be doing you any good if I didn't talk about it. And it's also easier to digest, smaller bits of information. So we're going to start just with the browser part. So what Lockdown Browser is, it's a browser. So it's the same type of application as Firefox and Chrome and Safari, right? That's a browser that you use to access different websites. In this case, Lockdown Browser is going to be the thing that your students, not instructors, your students use to access the ALEKS assessments. It prevents digital cheating. So what it's doing is it's stopping students from accessing other parts of the course, other websites, other applications. They won't be able to print and do all those kinds of things, so they can't share test questions or look up answers. Lockdown Browser, when used by itself, was designed for proctored settings, but that's not what we're going to focus on today. Again, I'm just going to do this overview of Lockdown Browser now so we understand this really critical component of how our proctoring solution works. Now, Lockdown Browser also is included at no additional charge. We have partnered with McGraw-Hill ALEKS and provided it for free. So thank you to McGraw-Hill for that. So if you are eventually someday going to return to those proctored tests, this part you do not have to pay for. It's just there. It's available to you. Now I mentioned briefly some of the things that Lockdown Browser does. It actually prevents hundreds and hundreds of exploits. We don't have time to cover all of them today, but the high level is here. They can't print the screen, they can't share the content, they can't visit other websites, and they can't use other applications. There are two perspectives to using or thinking about how Lockdown Browser works. There's actually three. One is setting it up in the administrator panel, but maybe your ALEKS folks have helped with that, or your administrators of your ALEKS platform. I'm going to focus today, though, on what instructors do, what you do with your individual tests or quizzes, or even those scheduled knowledge checks. I'm going to show you those settings in an ALEKS course, and then I'm going to show you what it looks like to take a test as a student. So give me a minute to just switch my screen so I can get out of here, get out of this PowerPoint slide here and go into an actual ALEKS course as an instructor. So one moment. All right, so I'm logging into ALEKS. I teach this little geometry class. Not really, but it's my sample. Now, when your ALEKS administrators, maybe your department or the folks that help you over at ALEKS McGraw-Hill, they may have set up the ability to enable Lockdown Browser and Respondus Monitor for tests. That's the first step. But once that's done, you're going to move into your assignments. And then we'll see a list of all of those quizzes and exam tests and knowledge checks that were created in the course already, right? So keep in mind, you're not giving a test in Lockdown Browser or Respondus Monitor. You're giving a test in ALEKS. Lockdown Browser is just a tool that students are going to use to get to it, and it restricts their access to other things. So to set up a test or a quiz or knowledge check, what you're going to do is select the quiz or test itself, or as you're creating it, and you're going to scroll down to the advanced options. In this, so that's step 4 right here, advanced options. Underneath that, you're going to see the Respondus security options. And there you will see the ability to require Lockdown Browser for this quiz or assessment. Or later on, we're going to come back and we're going to require Respondus Monitor for this assignment. So that will be, those all in the same place. It's a checkbox to turn it on and turn it off. So for Lockdown Browser by itself, that's pretty simple. You just save that initial checkbox and you're done. Again, we're going to come back to Respondus Monitor and talk about that a little bit later. But what you'll see now is that week 5 quiz I just set up says Lockdown Browser is required. So now you know your students have to use this specific browser to take the test. And everything I'm showing you now is exactly the same as how it works with Respondus Monitor too. Again, just breaking up the information I'm sharing with you so we can digest it more easily. Now let's talk about how Lockdown Browser works from the student's perspective. What the student is going to do is when they're in their ALEKS course and they're ready to take that assessment, they're going to first install the browser itself. Now, a couple notes on this. I'm sure there's a lot of you out there who might use Lockdown Browser with your other learning management systems, Blackboard, Canvas, Moodle. It is not the same browser. They have to install a different version of Lockdown Browser. There's one that specifically works with ALEKS. The nice thing is, though, it's super easy for students to find. All they have to do is go start the test, and there's the link to install the browser. It supports Windows, Mac, and iPads. I'm sorry, Chromebook users, but that's all. We cannot support Chromebooks. So Windows, Mac, and iPads. So that's what the student has to be able to install the browser. Now, they can install it on their personal computers. Some institutions have proctored testing centers or kiosks in the library. If those places are open, you can have Lockdown Browser installed there as well, because the student wouldn't be able to do that installation themselves if you're managing those machines. So they do actually need access to the Lockdown, to be able to install an application in order to use Lockdown Browser. So keep that in mind. As your students are asking about the computers they can use, it has to be their computer, or at least they have the admin rights to it. So let me switch really quickly and show you what it looks like to take a test in Lockdown Browser. I'm now going to log into ALEKS as a student. And notice I'm in a regular browser. Right, this is Chrome. I'm not in Lockdown Browser yet. What I do is I go into my course, and when I'm ready to take one of those tests or quizzes or knowledge checks, I kind of see the same thing. I get my quizzes and tests, and they'll say that they require Lockdown Browser. When I click on the quiz or test, though, here's what you see as part of the instructions. Lockdown Browser is required. Now, these are 2 things you can point students to make sure that they install this correctly and everything's set up right. First of all, they're going to download the browser from here. When you click on that, it goes to a page. This is actually publicly available on the ALEKS website, where you can find the Windows, Mac. These are actually the same link, and then the iPad app. And there's some system requirements right here. The other thing students see is the ability to check the Lockdown Browser setup to make sure that it was installed correctly. If your students are used to installing anything, this is a piece of cake. It's the same thing as installing any other application. I already have it installed, though, so I'm not going to bore you with what that looks like. I'm going to launch the browser. So here's where the student is ready to take the test, and now we switch from our regular browser to Lockdown Browser. So now what you're seeing is me launching Lockdown Browser from my test in ALEKS. Now that I'm in this special browser, you're going to see a couple things happening here. First of all, Lockdown Browser opens full screen. It takes over the whole desktop and hides everything, so students can't access anything they might have on that desktop, or that start button, or that dock, or that system tray. That's all hidden in Lockdown Browser. Also, you might notice it's open full screen and you can't minimize or resize it. In addition, there's no web address field up here or menu or plugins or bookmarking. All of those things you might see in a standard browser do not exist in lockdown browser. So again, that's to protect the test, the integrity of the test. You also might notice that this little window popped up here when I launched the browser. It's telling me I need to close other applications. I'm not allowed to use an instant messaging program, that's what Trillian is. Skype will close down. Students can't use things like screen sharing applications. Zoom will not work. GoToMeeting, GoToWebinar, it shouldn't work, but we have a special setup, so that's how we get around that. But students will not be able to share their screens with other people. Additionally, things like Spotify and Pandora, all those things get shut down because we don't want students communicating or listening to cheat sheets or anything like that. Then we click Start and we take our quiz. So this is going to look just like a quiz in ALEKS because it is. This is just lockdown browser pointing to ALEKS. I am, please, those of you that teach math, forgive me if I do not get any of these right. I am going to guess as I go through this. It's been a long time since I've taken geometry. This is only a one-question sample quiz, but all of the features in ALEKS work the same way. So if there is a built-in calculator for some of these questions, works the same way. If you have multiple question types, things that work, not just your simple multiple choice questions or fill in the blanks, there's lots of different question types in ALEKS assessments. They're all going to work the same way in lockdown browser because you're still in ALEKS when you're taking your test. I'll submit this assignment, confirm. It's going to tell me I took this quiz. Oh, I got 100%, hooray. And then notice down here there's a button that says exit lockdown browser. So we can close the browser and it points me back to my ALEKS course, and this is the Chrome browser. It says confirmation, you're done. So now I'm done taking my test or quiz. And that is hopefully pretty straightforward. That is using lockdown browser by itself. Now we're going to build on that now, and we're going to show you how to add on Respondus Monitor, which again is our automated proctoring solution. Respondus Monitor takes everything you just saw, the experience of using that locked browser, that seamless integration, and it's going to add a webcam and some other technology. And the goal here with Respondus Monitor is to deter cheating during those online tests. So students know they're being recorded, therefore they're a lot less likely to try to do anything they shouldn't be doing, like sharing test questions or looking up answers or pulling out that cheat sheet. It does record the student during the entire assessment. It collects some other pieces of data for you, and then you, as the instructor, have the ability to review that information after the assessment. And we don't just say, hey guys, here's a video, go watch it. That's not what this is for. Respondus Monitor is deterring cheating first and foremost. But if you do suspect something happened, we present you with a video review screen that includes the videos in priority order, most to least suspicious. There are flags of certain types of suspicious behavior. There's other data there to help you look at the big picture, decide if you think individual students warrant further review, dig more deeply if you need to, look at individual videos. It's all there. And we try to present it to you in a really easy to read, meaningful way. So you're not spending a lot of time reviewing the results. But the other thing that's really important to know, and we get this question a lot, is, this is an automated proctoring solution. Respondus staff, ALEKS staff, we're not looking at these videos. We can't see them. They are protected behind your login to your ALEKS courses. That means that the determination of whether or not a student cheated is in the right hands with the people that know them best, their instructors, the people at their institution, not us. But we try to give you meaningful data so it's easy and efficient for you to make that determination. And a lot of you might be here because you got a notification or some information either from us or from ALEKS. Respondus Monitor right now is free for ALEKS higher education course users through June 17th because of the coronavirus and needing to move things online. So there is no charge for Respondus Monitor right now. Normally we have a student purchase model. Don't worry about that. Let's not talk about that now. We can certainly answer your questions about what happens after that, but we'll focus on how this works for today. So once again, I'm going to pop back into that course and I'm going to show you what it looks like to set up an ALEKS test so that it requires the use of Respondus Monitor and Lockdown Browser. Keep in mind that what we're doing is we're building on Lockdown Browser here. So everything that we just did with Lockdown Browser is exactly the same with Respondus Monitor. We're just going to add that monitor requirement. And then I'll show you what the results look like in something called the Respondus Monitor dashboard. That's where you're going to find those videos. We can talk about what that looks like. And then I'll show you what it looks like to take a test as a student too. All right, so here is me logged in as an instructor. Here's my geometry course. That's the one we just were in where we took that quiz. Again, we're going to those assignments. There'll be our list of quizzes and tests and knowledge checks and so on. Here's the quiz that we just took that it required Lockdown Browser by itself. We go down to that section called Advanced Options, and there's that Respondus Monitor webcam requirement. So we're going to check that box. Notice there's a little note under there that says, select the Respondus Monitor dashboard from the assignment list to configure advanced settings. So we're going to go and take a look at that. So once we click Save, now we have at least one quiz or test or knowledge check that requires the webcam and Lockdown Browser. You can see these three do. This little link up here at the top of the assignment list appears. This is called the Respondus Monitor dashboard. When I open this, you're going to see some advanced settings and then also the video review. So you've got one place to go before and then after the test to set your tests up and then see what happened during it if you need to. So let's take that same quiz, that week 5 quiz right here, select advanced settings. And now I'm actually going to make this screen nice and big for you. And now you see some additional options where I can further customize the student's experience when they're using the webcam. There's a list right here in a set of items called the startup sequence. This is a series of steps that students go through before they start the test. By the way, if you put a time limit on your tests, which you probably do, that does not start until they see test questions. So this is pre-exam. A lot of these can be turned off or edited by you, by the instructor for each test. So you can decide which pieces you need depending on the exam and how much it's worth, or depending on your individual unique needs for your courses. I will keep them all on because I'm going to show you what they look like in a little bit. But the webcam check at the very top here, what this step does is it enables the student to make sure, or requires the student really, make sure that their webcam is working properly. The important thing with this step is, the student does it every single time they take a test with ALEKS, whether it's the first or Respondus Monitor and Lockdown Browser in ALEKS. Doesn't matter if it's the first test or the 101st test, they have to do that webcam check and they have to pass. Now, the really nice thing about it is there is built-in troubleshooting and help for students. So if something goes wrong, like the webcam doesn't work or the microphone can't be detected because you need a microphone, we record sound as well as video, there's help for students right there. There's live chat features, there's troubleshooting features, something called the Help Center. So they've got a lot of technical assistance right in the application itself. So that one's required. Then next up, we have an optional setting called Guidelines and Tips, and I'll just do a little preview of that for you. It basically is a series of screens that reminds the student they're taking a test, they're going to be recorded. Here are some rules to follow to make sure there is a clear video of you so that your instructor can see that you're not cheating, you're doing your own work. Basic things like don't cover your face, sit in a well-lit room, turn off all those other devices, remind you that you can't access any other applications. Not a bad thing to add, especially if this is the student's first time taking an online test. Then we have some steps that allow you to verify the student's identity. The student photo uses the webcam to take a picture of the student, and the show ID uses that same webcam and has the student take a picture of a form of identification. So for example, you can write the directions that go with this. If you want students only to use their university or school issued photo ID, or you're allowed to use driver's licenses or state ID cards or passports, whatever is okay with you, you can write those directions in right here. Now, I will say, sometimes instructors don't use either of these identification settings because you also are going to see the video when the students are taking the test. You're going to see them in that video. And if you're teaching face-to-face or you see your students because of other situations before, you might not need to confirm their identity. You're going to see them anyway. But sometimes institutions want you to collect these items because later on, maybe this is for accreditation purposes, or maybe you just need to kind of cover all the bases, make sure that there's no chance a student is going to try to have other people do their work for them. The next step here, called the environment check, is actually a video the student takes of their surroundings. Now, I get a lot of questions about this step almost every day. Instructors will often ask me, what's the best way to use this feature? And really, I would encourage you to think about, what do you need for your tests? You know, if they're allowed to use scrap paper or look up formulas in a book, maybe don't use the environment check because there's going to be clutter around them as they're taking the test, but that's okay. But if it's a totally closed book test, maybe have the students show you their desktop or the tabletop where they're sitting, so you can make sure that they don't have that notebook or phone somewhere that they could possibly be using to cheat. The environment check does record the surroundings. It means the student has to move their webcam around if that's what you want them to do. But this works with built-in webcams as well as the kind you can move with a cord, the external kind. So if they have a laptop or that iPad, they just pick that device up and they move it around. Now, for those students, you might be worried about any students who have those built-in webcams in those big, bulky monitor screens. Well, in that case, you can get kind of creative. I know some instructors who use handheld mirrors to have the student show a video of what's around them. Again, you can write whatever directions you want in here and customize this for each test. Next up, we have something called additional instructions. This is just, any last-minute reminders for the student. Remind them of the honor code here. Remind them that this is a closed book or open book, whatever it is you're giving. Sometimes instructors use this last step here to remind students of what to do in case of an emergency. We're all moving into this online world, and for some people, this is a new frontier, and students might be worried about what happens if the power goes out. We can talk about that, a little bit more in the best practices, but one thing that always helps is to prepare students. If there's some reason you can't finish this test because the power goes out, here's what I want you to do. Email me if you can, text me if you can, communicate with me somehow so I know that you had an emergency. I'm not left wondering why there's an incomplete exam in my grade book. But again, you can use this however you'd like. And then these settings here, this last checkbox that's required and these two down at the bottom are all part of something called facial detection. And it's worth talking about this for a little bit more because when we go and we look at the video review, facial detection is a pretty big component of what we're going to be looking at. I'm oversimplifying it, but facial detection is basically, is there a face in the video or not? And that's one of the primary things that Respondus Monitor uses when it processes the videos that your students are taking of themselves when they're taking tests, right? The underlying assumption being that you're sitting in front of the camera, which is on top of your screen, you're looking at the screen and you're doing your work yourself. You're not looking away, you're not getting up, you're not having someone else take your place and finish a few hard questions for you. So facial detection is making sure the student is sitting in the right place and taking their test. This check that you see here is a required step every time the student takes the test. We want to make sure that they are actually sitting in the right position. If, for example, they moved their camera when they did that environment check, they put it back in the right place so they can be clearly recorded. Now, you can decide if this step is required or optional. That's what this setting here is. Prevent students from starting the exam if face cannot be detected. That means if they fail this check, they can't start the test. And that's going to be a way to stop students from doing things like trying to cover up the camera or move it to point to their forehead, so you can decide if you want to use that or not. Additionally, down here, you can include a notification or not during the exam if their face cannot be detected. And again, that would be for the situations when, and this might happen in those longer assessments, where students start to get tired and they slouch, and all of a sudden you're looking at their forehead instead of their face. They're going to fail facial detection if that happens. So it pops up an alert, it tells the student their face can't be detected, it lets them adjust their camera, and then boom, they're right back into the test itself. So that notification is a great way to ensure that students are continuously visible. If they're trying to cover the camera, if they're trying to get up, they're going to see that alert and they're going to know they're going to get caught. And if for some reason students are not able to achieve facial detection, the number one culprit for the reason for that is lighting. If they're sitting in a dark room, if they're in shadow, if they're backlit and it's also kind of dark out, students might have trouble if they're not lit properly, if there isn't a light in front of them, if they're only using the glow from the screen. In that case, this setting, even if you have it turned on, the student can bypass it if they're not able to achieve facial detection. But it will get flagged. There will be a flag that shows up and tells you, hey, the student bypassed this step, but you might be able to tell why just by looking at the video preceding that. All right, there's one last setting here. It's a little bit out of order. It's called the proctor setting or optional setting sometimes. This is the ability for you to allow students to choose if they want to use a webcam or not. So we call this the optional setting because it's webcam optional. When you check this box, what it does is it allows your students to decide they want to use a webcam and be recorded, they use Lockdown Browser, they do it from home. Or if they don't want to use a webcam for whatever reason, they've got to find a proctor. And that's not easy if our testing centers are closed right now or students shouldn't be congregating. But, you know, under normal circumstances, maybe this would be a little bit easier. You could still have students go into your office hours, into the classroom, into the testing center. And when they do that, if they choose not to use a webcam, as this note explains, they still have to use Lockdown Browser, and someone needs to let them into the test with a password. So you would create the password and then give it to the proctor, or use it yourself if the proctor is you. But we're going to turn that off today just to keep things simpler, and also we're all focused on those remote tests anyway. So there, I saved my advanced settings for my week 5 quiz, and now my students, when they take this test, they're going to need all those steps. They're going to go through the webcam check, the ID, and all those things we just described. While we're here in this dashboard, I want to also explain to you the results, what it looks like after a test when your students have finished it and you are ready to review the video and the other data that gets collected. Now, you're going to be in the same dashboard, the very same place that you started off. And I'm going to shrink this down a little bit to show you again where you get this. It is from this link at the top of your assignment list once you've required Respondus Monitor for at least one test in your course. So when we get back to that dashboard, you're going to see next to the name of a test, this link to video review. Now here's where you're going to see the videos. And again, I'm going to make this bigger so it's easy to see. At the very top of this video review screen, for this exam only, we're going to see the number of students finished the test who not yet attempted it, maybe some are in progress. And you're also going to see this line that is part of our review priority feature. So review priority is a way that Respondus Monitor, the application, takes about a dozen different data points from every assessment, kind of bundles them up together, and then shows you in a ranking system the high and medium and low priority videos. So high priority videos means there might be a lot of suspicious activity here, you know, a couple flags or low quality video or other things. Maybe those are the videos that you focus on, you look at first. Because again, don't forget, students know they're being recorded, and this is a deterrent to cheating. So the amount of time you spend looking at videos should be fairly minimal. But this gives you a way to quickly scan that whole class and say, well, here's some I'm going to spend a tiny bit more time on. So in this example, we've got a high priority and a medium priority video, and then some others. You'll also see on this screen the student's name, the date they submitted the exam. If the test had been graded, this one just wasn't, because I think this was a fairly old exam, the grades will also appear here. You'll see the duration of the video, and then you can make notes and mark them as having been reviewed as you're going through this data. Now, a lot of instructors will tell me that, you know, they might use high priority, like I'm going to hone in on the high priority videos first, but I might also look at things like the grades or the duration. If we have a student who, like in this case, took the test in, you know, half the time as everybody else and still scored well, maybe I want to look at that student too. But it will be sorted by priority first. So it starts off at high priority. You can also sort by name too if you wanted to. And when you're ready, if you need to look at an individual student's video, you click the plus sign next to the student's name, and then more data will expand right in line. Now, before I go into too much detail showing you all these pieces, let me point you to a link that is going to be incredibly useful for you as you're using these tools, especially for the first time. Up at the top here, after your priority list, is this link called How is Priority Determined? This points to a website, a guide to understanding these results. So a summary at the top, an example here, a key to all the different pieces we're about to talk about, how the priority is determined, I just mentioned that. What are the different flags? There's a list here. And then some tips for understanding this data. I strongly recommend that everybody using Respondus Monitor review this information carefully from how is priority determined. You can also get there from this more detailed link. And then as you're looking at each individual student, you're going to see this square is your video player. So if I clicked play, I'd be watching her take her test. We also see the summary of the priority information. The student has a high priority video because she has a couple flags. Her facial detection percentage is kind of low. That might be because of the quality of the video. We can see her internet connection maybe a little bit weaker, so it's a little fuzzier, but we can go take a look. You're also going to see this list here of specific flagged events, if there are any. In this case, there's a couple. And this student, you know, her face was missing from the frame. Each flag has a definition. You might also see different, if there's a different face in there, or multiple, if there's more than one face. And then each flag has a timestamp. So if I click on that timestamp, the video, once this catches up, is going to go right to that 10-minute, 21-second mark, and I can watch the flag, which is very much easier than skipping around, right? So here it is. Now she's missing. It's much easier than trying to watch a video from start to finish. Additionally, I can go back 10 seconds and watch what happened before the flag started. I can skip to the next flag. And then we actually updated the video player. This is a slightly older one. You'll also see here the ability to watch this video in 8, 4, and 2 times speed. So if you want to watch a couple flags faster, you can do that too. You probably also notice there's a timeline down here. It allows you to drag this around to different points during the video. And then down below, you have these thumbnails. Now, these are basically snapshots taken at a random interval throughout the entire test. And a lot of instructors I work with will tell me that this is the most useful thing here, not the flags and the other pieces. I'm going to scan these thumbnails because it only takes me about 2 seconds to look at all these little pictures and say, wait a minute, she's missing in a couple of places. I'm going to click on one of those spots, and I can do that by clicking the thumbnail, and it will take me to that point in time. And I'm going to watch the video at that point here instead of, you know, trying to watch the whole thing or skip around by flags. So you can scan the entire video very easily from here down in these thumbnails. Now, also in the thumbnails, you might be noticing there's a student photo. That's if you use that in the startup sequence. There's her ID card. We also can watch that environment video if we wanted to see her, show you her surroundings. That's great. And in newer tests, this one is a year and a half or so old, you might also see some milestones here. What the milestones do is they add timestamps at different points along the test. So you might see in here, for example, when the student answered each question. So you can even put some more context to what you're seeing. If there's a flag and you know they're on question 5, well, you've got more data there that will tell you what happened during the test. I'll also show you, just for comparison's sake, a low priority video. Let's go down here to this one. Here is a student who was sitting in the right place the whole time. We can see her face and her shoulders. If you look up here, there's no flags, no problems whatsoever. It's really easy to take 2 seconds and look at these thumbnails, even if there were many, many more of them, and say, I'm not worried about this student at all. I'm going to confirm her ID. You know, I'm going to make sure that she did the environment video the way I asked, and I move on. Because again, we're not suggesting that as instructors you have to review all this information. We're saying you can use it as a guide efficiently and effectively to determine if cheating did happen. But keeping in mind all the while that this is acting as a powerful deterrent to cheating. Students know they're being recorded. And, you know, the risk they're taking by blatantly cheating during a test is pretty high because it's really easy for you to look at this information. And if you do need to follow up with a student, you can add notes here. You can also mark a video as having been reviewed. Sometimes you need to escalate things and get the department chair or the dean or the academic advisory committee involved. This is a way that you can note these for other people as well. Okay, so that's a lot of talking for me to describe how this works from the instructor's perspective. We had 2 steps here. We set up the test so that it requires Respondus Monitor and Lockdown Browser right in our ALEKS course with these settings here. Then we also looked at that dashboard where some of the advanced settings were, the customization for the webcam experience, and also that video. What I'm going to do now is switch gears a little bit and show you what this all looks like from the student's perspective. Now, it's going to seem a little familiar because we just did this. We just showed you how to take a test in Lockdown Browser. Respondus Monitor takes Lockdown Browser and adds that webcam. So the student still needs to launch Lockdown Browser from the ALEKS course. They need to install it if they've never done that before, and then they just need to make sure that webcam works for them. Now, to show you how this works, just in the interest of time today, I'm going to show you some screenshots. So this is the same actual quiz that we were in earlier. Again, we're going to see the download link here. It's going to also say that the Respondus Monitor is required. When the student is ready and has that webcam, they're going to click Launch Lockdown Browser and Webcam. When they do that, same thing, we're going to see the browser launch. And then instead of going into the first screen before the test or the test questions, what we're going to see here are those startup sequence items. So if you recall, these were the steps that we selected when we were setting this test up as an instructor. There are a couple of them here. I turned them all on here. If you decide not to use a couple of them, this list just gets shorter. The first thing the student sees is a terms of use agreement. They click agree, and we move into that webcam check. So here's where we're making sure that the webcam works. Now, like I said before, the student will get a lot of help as they're doing this. If the webcam can't be detected, if the microphone can't be detected, the student will get prompted with some solutions. So they can email those solutions to themselves, or they can get help through our live chat system. But this is making sure that everything works properly. The webcam works, the microphone works, they have an internet connection, and so on. They just record a brief video of themselves, and then that gets discarded, and they move on to the next step, which are the guidelines and tips. Oops. And we saw those already, so I'm not going to go through them again. Then the student photo looks something like this, where the student is going to smile into the camera and take that picture. They can try again if they don't like it. Here's that it's not working link. If at some point the webcam doesn't work again, we can get help here. Show ID is very similar. Obviously, this isn't a real ID card. This is just a hotel credit room card, because this is me doing this when I was traveling. But again, they would just snap a picture of that ID, and then this photo on the right-hand side would get displayed in those results. The environment check is where the student is going to make sure that their area around their computer is clear of papers and books and phones. There's some junk out here, but again, this was me taking a sample test, not a real test. Again, if the student has a built-in camera, this might mean picking that device up and moving it around, or using a mirror. But the external camera is useful because you can also move that around very easily. But this is also one of those optional steps. So if you decide you don't need it, it's not necessary, it's extraneous, this doesn't have to be required for every test. There's our facial detection check, where the student makes sure that they are sitting with their face in front of the camera. They get that quick thumbs up and they can click continue. If they get the thumbs down, it's going to say, please adjust your face, the angle of your camera, or the lighting. And then they begin their exam. And look at this, the same question, or slightly different question that we saw before. So now the student is in the ALEKS test, quiz, assessment, test, quiz, knowledge check. They're in lockdown browser, same as we saw before, with all those things we talked about. Lockdown browser, no menu bar, no web address field, no start menu, system tray dock, and they can't use function, command keys, keyboard shortcuts to do things like print, or that right-click mouse menu. That's also disabled when you're in lockdown browser. And then the differences in using Respondus Monitor versus lockdown browser is really just the fact that they're being recorded. This icon in the upper right-hand corner tells them that they're being recorded. And then if they fail facial detection for whatever reason, it's going to look very similar to the pre-exam facial detection check. It covers their screen, it shows their own video, and it says, we can't see you, so please make those adjustments before you can continue. When they submit this test to be graded, that recording stops. They get their confirmation, they exit lockdown browser, and then they're able to move on. And you will get that video with all the data with it. I usually suggest waiting about 8 to 12 hours for that to be processed. Sometimes it's faster. The minimum amount of time is how long it took the student to take the test. So 1 hour test, 1 hour for processing at a minimum. All right, so with all of that, I just showed you an awful lot of information. I want to talk about some best practices and getting started. First of all, as I mentioned this earlier, Lockdown Browser and Respondus Monitor at this time are free for institutions using higher education math and science courses in ALEKS. That means you don't need to pay us, you just need to turn it on and use it. So if you're an administrator of the ALEKS platform at your institution and you'd like to see those settings, submit a question, I'm happy to do that. But it is just a couple of check boxes to turn on in your ALEKS administrator area. Then your instructors are going to see the settings in each individual test, quiz, knowledge check. As instructors, I strongly recommend, if you can, you have the time, try this yourselves. If you can set up a quick quiz in a course with one question in it, just like I did, apply the Lockdown Browser, Respondus Monitor settings, and take it. because that's going to help you select the settings for your each individual exams. You know, those knowledge checks, maybe you don't need all that extra stuff. Maybe you just want to keep students focused. But maybe that final exam, that needs to be the ID and the environment check, and all those other pieces need to be included. There's a lot of flexibility with Respondus Monitor. It will also help you prepare your students. You know exactly what to expect, then you can turn around and give them the correct instructions. The best way to prepare your students, though, is to have them take a practice quiz. Under normal circumstances, I would say that's the first thing you do at the start of a semester or a term, but we are not in normal circumstances right now. So, if you have the ability to set up an extra quiz that's not graded or very low stakes, please do that. Give your students the chance in a low pressure, no stress environment where they can install the browser, check their webcam, go through the experience of taking the test so they know what it's like. Then they can, resolve any technical issues with our support or your help. They also can understand your expectations. They know what you want them to do and not do during those tests. Because if you look at the practice quiz, and you'll get a video for it, and you see things like students responding to texts or talking to other people or getting up in the middle of the test to use the bathroom, let's tell them not to do that during a real exam. Lock the door, turn off the phone, and make sure you take a bio break before you start your test so you're not left wondering if they were cheating. So that practice quiz will also help you set the expectations for the real graded exam. I can't emphasize how important that is, but I also know, we are in unusual circumstances right now and sometimes strapped for time. To the extent that you can give them a practice quiz, please do. It's going to make things go better, both for you and for your students. All right, we covered a lot. I know the amazing folks that we work with at McGraw-Hill and ALEKS can answer your questions too. They know a lot about these applications, but so can we. At Respondus, we have a training team dedicated to answering questions about how our applications work. You are welcome to write to us. We will do our best to get back to you in a timely fashion. As you probably can imagine, we are very busy these days, but we will do our best. And we have another 15 minutes or so before the top of the hour where we can answer your questions here. So I've asked one of my colleagues on the training team, her name is Erin Thornberry, to read out loud some of those questions while I take a breath. Erin, are you there?
I am, Ari. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Great. So thank you for that thorough overview. We had several folks who might have missed it coming in late or just didn't hear, but can you review what the system requirements are?
Oh, great question. Yeah, I can actually point you to a page that will show you. So students who are going to use ALEKS for their course assessments, tests, quizzes, knowledge checks, I'm sorry, not ALEKS, Lockdown Browser and Respondus Monitor, they need to be online. Obviously, like it's an online platform, we need to have an internet connection. To install Lockdown Browser and Respondus Monitor, really, it's the browser that's the part they have to install. They need to be on either a Windows computer, a Mac computer, like a MacBook or other, Mac laptop or something like that. And then they also can use an iPad. So, a relatively new version of a tablet. It's got a camera built into it, so super easy for that. You don't need an extra webcam if you have an iPad. There is a page. I'm going to go back to it now. When the student goes to start a test, that called Download Lockdown Browser. This is also linked from the ALEKS website in some of the FAQs about Lockdown Browser and Respondus Monitor. If you just go to aleks.com, you'll be able to find it. It has those specific system requirements, like specific operating systems and the memory, which actually I think this number has gone down recently for both Windows and Mac. We've made the browser application itself smaller, but they do need to be able to install the browser. It is a full application. It's not a plugin or a setting. It's a browser. It's similar to Chrome, Safari, Firefox, but it's its own thing. So they do need to be able to install that.
Great, thank you, Ari. We had several, and this question seems to be coming up a lot, several folks asking about, these are math exams and they allow their students to use scrap paper. Can you give any advice in terms of what they might see in the results or how to handle those results, given that their students might be looking down?
Right, yeah, so we get this question all the time, and we know a lot of instructors who do exactly what you're thinking. They're allowed to use scrap paper. They're allowed to have a formula sheet. Maybe they're even allowed to look things up in a textbook or something. When you're using Respondus Monitor, really the base of it, it's just recording the student. And then it's flagging the videos afterwards based on a number of criteria. So you may know that it's okay that your students are looking away a lot during a test. So when you look at the result, at the video review, and you see the student looking away or looking down, or maybe even there's a flag, this is an open paper, open scrapbook, open note, open book test, you can ignore that. That's objective data. It is not making any kind of judgment call on whether the student is or isn't cheating. And it doesn't poke the student and yell at them if they look away. If they look away for an extended period of time, and extended, I mean, more than just a quick glance away, they might see that facial detection show up on the screen, that during exam alert, if you turned it on. But as soon as they look up and face the camera, it's going to go away. So that really shouldn't be too annoying to them. It shouldn't disrupt them very much. And also, if you know your entire test is open open note, scrap paper, open book, you can also turn that facial detection setting off so it doesn't bother your students. But keep in mind that, all of the data we present to you is just objective data. We're not telling you students did or didn't cheat. So if you have an open book test and they all come back with flags on them, you know why. You can ignore that.
Great, thank you, Ari. There were a couple questions about the customizations that you went over. Now, do those need to be set for each exam, or how's that handled?
Yeah, so the Respondus Monitor, like the startup sequence under those advanced settings, those are a test-by-test group of settings. So they do need to be applied to each test in your courses. So, and that's by design. Some instructors might say, I really don't need every single one of these for every single test because some of my tests are really low stakes. I don't need ID for everybody, but maybe I want it on the final because that's the highest, most valuable exam I'm giving. So they are test by test settings.
Great, thank you, Ari. And I don't know if you'll be able to answer this question, but I know you'll know where to direct people. So we have actually a couple of administrators on the line, and they want to enable these settings within their environment. Do you have any guidance for them?
You bet. I even have some screenshots for you. So if you're an administrator of your ALEKS platform, when you log in as an administrator, you're going to look for this institution settings area highlighted here. And this is where you click edit and you can enable lockdown browser by itself or lockdown browser with Respondus Monitor. So that's the initial setup. The other thing that you're going to need to do is go to edit those settings. When you enable them, you'll want to select at this time the student purchase option here. That is what we are making available for free, partnered with McGraw-Hill, and I know some of their folks are on the call today. Thank you, everybody at ALEKS. Students do not actually have to pay, but if you use this option, that will enable students to finish out their classes this term all the way through June 17th without paying for the additional use of the webcam. So that's how you want to set that up. There is also an administrator guide that your ALEKS representative or someone from Respondus can get to you if you need more details.
Great, Ari, thank you. And then we had some questions about test settings, timers in particular. How does Lockdown Browser Respondus Monitor interact with those timers that instructors have set?
Yeah, great question. So, your settings are part of the ALEKS platform. So when you're creating your tests and quizzes, if you want a 2-hour limit, you set it up in ALEKS, and our applications don't touch that. So your tests are going to work the same way they always have. The difference when you're using Respondus Monitor, you probably noticed, you've got to go through that startup sequence, right? You've got to do the webcam check, the student does. They've got to show ID. Those things happen before the test starts. So the time limit, if there is one, doesn't start ticking until the student actually sees a test question. Those are pre-exam startup items. The logical follow-up question to that I will anticipate is, how long do those things take? I mean, maybe 2 minutes if the student knows what to expect and they have their ID with them and their webcam works. And, you know, that's why the practice quiz is so important, because the student will be able to practice doing those things and not take a lot of time. So, you know, maybe a minute or two to go through the startup sequence, depending on what you required, and then they're in their test. But again, that initial minute or two does not count for the amount of time the student has to take the test in the form of a time limit that you set.
Great, thanks, Ari. Just 2 more questions because I know we're running short on time. There was a question about, sorry, and I'm spacing on what the question was, about whether, sorry.
That's okay.
I gotta find it again.
Questions.
There's lots of questions coming in. If there's a lot of questions about using a calculator during the exam, catching, you know, if you have students who have those external devices, kind of reviewing those results, and how you would determine what they might be doing with those external devices.
So, you know, I know that some of the ALEKS assessments themselves actually have, you know, questions, calculators and other tools built into them. I'm definitely not an ALEKS content expert, but I have seen like the calculator icon and some other things, like you can draw graphs and things like that. Those things work exactly the same way as they're designed in the ALEKS course. If your students have external devices, though, like a phone or a scientific calculator, like the physical thing, you know, Respondus Monitor is going to record them using it, but that's about it. You'll just see them using that device if you allow them to during a test. Just like the scrap paper, you might see them looking down to use their calculator. If you don't let them use those devices, though, then, you know, you need to tell them that the calculator is built in. They don't need to bring an extra device into the test environment. You can use that environment check to make sure that students have not, you know, brought anything like that into the test environment too. So I hope that answers the question.
Yes, thank you. And then that final question, I found it, was how long those videos are stored for. I think you mentioned that during the presentation, but just to follow up.
No, you caught me. I think I forgot. So with Respondus Monitor, those videos are stored for 5 years by default. So, you know, you might look at a couple of videos over the course of the semester or the course, but you can also go back to them later if you need to, as long as you can still access the ALEKS course itself. From that video review, those videos will be available for up to 5 years, which is great. We have heard from other institutions that can be helpful if a student does, you know, something happens during a test, they get caught, you know, cheating in another assessment, a different course, then you always can go back and look at their entire academic record. It also means, though, as instructors, you don't have to rush to review any of this information. You know, these videos are there for your entire semester. They don't expire after 30 days or something like that. So they're there for you.
Great, thank you, Ari. And we do have just a couple minutes left. So I'm going to ask you one more question, if that's okay, and then I will leave it to you to wrap it up. Lots of questions about students who don't have access to a webcam. What happens if our students don't have access to a webcam?
Yes, unfortunately, our solution is a webcam-based solution. So when a student is using or needs to use Respondus Monitor and Lockdown Browser to take a test, they have to have a webcam. There is a optional setting. You know, if you can provide the student with a proctored environment to take the test without a webcam, they still need Lockdown Browser. Someone's going to need to let them in with the password. But because our solution is automated, because students are being recorded, they have to have that webcam. I know institutions who do things like make webcams available for borrowing from the library. Certainly a lot of webcams are plug and play. You can borrow them from other people. Most laptops sold in the last, I don't know, 7 years or so have built-in cameras. So I hope that, isn't a problem for a lot of students, but this is a webcam-based solution, so you do need a webcam.
And that's it, Ari. There are still several questions that we didn't get to. I know our contact information is up on the screen, but I will turn it over to you to wrap up with the remaining time that we have.
Great, thank you everyone. So we did record this session, including all the Q&A, so we'll make sure that gets out to everybody. You'll get an email probably tomorrow with the recording and links to some resources. And you can reach out to either your ALEKS representatives or to the training team at Respondus if you need any additional assistance. Please be patient with us, though. We are so busy and inundated with requests for help as we're all in this together, moving our classes online, but we will do our best to assist you. Thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate your time and your attention. We hope this was helpful. Look for that email, and all the best to everybody. Stay healthy, wash those hands. Thanks for joining. Have a great day.